The Mighty Miss Malone, Chapter 11, Pulling Myself Together. We were in the kitchen working on supper. Even if Father showed up now, there wouldn't be time to clean and cook the perch, so we started making our regular Sunday meal, just in case. Mother had said that perch would make a fine Monday meal. I shouldn't have said anything, but I told her I had a bad feeling about Father not being home. I wouldn't worry, sweetheart. Your father can take care of himself. She rolled her eyes. He is from Flint, after all. He'll be home soon. Let's give him another hour or two. Then, if it'll make you feel better, we'll walk over to the Hendersons. I watched her very close, trying to see if she really wasn't worried or was just trying to keep me from getting scared. There weren't any 111 lines showing, and the way she cut the onions and hummed, I knew she wasn't pretending, so I relaxed. I still couldn't keep my eyes from looking at the clock. 5:41. 5 minutes later, the knock came. I slammed my knife down and ran to the front door, ready to give Father I don't know what for making us worry like this. Well, for making me worry. A second before I got to the door, I thought, wait, why would Father knock? I opened the door. Good evening, Deza. Is your father here? My stomach started slowly folding. No, Mrs. Henderson, he's not home yet. Mother's in the. Mother was behind me, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. Helen, come in. What's wrong? Mrs. Henderson said, hello, Margaret. Roscoe's not home? Did Steve come by here? Steve is Mr. Steel Lung's real name. A look flashed in Mother's eyes. No, what time were you expecting him? He said they wouldn't be out past noon. That's when the fish quit biting. Mother and Mrs. Henderson sat on the couch. I was frozen in the doorway. Mother said, what about Hank and Carlos? Did you? Yes, yes. Hank's kids hadn't seen him, and Carlos's wife hasn't heard anything either. Mother leaned back on the couch. Oh, dear, Deza. Go take care of the pot. Take the pot off the stove. The screen door slammed behind me, and Mother didn't even notice. Mrs. Henderson said, Peg, do you know anyone with a car? I've got a little money for gas, and I know where Steve parks when he goes fishing. We could see if his truck is still there. Mother said, I can see if Mr. Rhymes is home. Deza, what did I tell you? Turn off the stove and wait here for Jimmy. Don't tell him anything. He'd go out looking on his own, and that's all we need. 2 Malone men wandering around. She squeezed my cheek, leaving the damp smell of onions and soap on my face. Mother's voice was scaring me to death. It was far too calm. I ran to turn off the stove. By the time I got back, they were gone. I picked the dish towel off the floor where Mother had dropped it. She had been twisting it so hard that it was like a piece of soft blue and pink and white rope. I unwound the towel and snapped it a couple of times before I hung it back next to the stove. I took the kitchen clock with me and sat on the porch, hoping Mr. Steele Long would drop Father off and we'd all laugh about how scared we were. I'd point at the clock and say to Father, do you have any idea how late it is? About 100 hours later, at 6:50, a car stopped in front of our house and the back door came open. Mother ran from the car. Any word from your father? No, Mother. Is Jimmy home yet? No. We won't be long. She got back in the car. Mr. Rhymes' car turned left onto Fifth Street and disappeared. Mother always says, a watch pot never boils, and I can tell you that a watch clock never moves. A million hours later, at 8 o'clock, and starting to get dark, Mr. Rhymes' car turned back onto our street. I ran off the porch and prayed, let Mother be giving Father a good piece of her mind for worrying us like this. The back door of the car opened. Mother stepped out and said something to Mr. Rhymes. Not only did Father not get out of the car, but Mother saw me standing on the sidewalk, leaned her head back into the automobile, and wiped at her eyes. She'd been crying. My legs gave out and I fell on my knees. Hot tears started boiling out of my eyes, but I couldn't make a sound. Mother had me in her arms in a second. If she started any sentence with, Deza, I'm sorry, I'd die right on the spot. But she just held me. I heard Mr. Rhymes get out of his car. He walked up to us. Peg, if you need anything, send your boy and I can be here in no time. Mother said, thank you, John. Thank you very much. She squeezed my arms hard. Deza, you have to listen to me. Her eyes were bloodshot and the lines between them were at 1111. Oh, Mother, I'm ready. Tell me what happened. We don't know yet. The truck was still parked by the lake. We figure they got lost. A huge fog bank came in while they were out there. We'll just have to wait and see. He's not. No, Deza. They're just missing. We made a report at the police station. We have to be patient and wait. The police said 6 other fishermen have gone missing in the fog. This has happened before, but it's not as bad as it might seem. She wiped at my tears and kissed my cheek. The onion and soap smell was gone. Deza, think how worried Jimmy will be if he sees you crying like this. You've got to pull yourself together. Pull yourself together? This was the second time in 3 days I'd been told that. As Mother wrapped her arms around me and led me into the house, I wondered if my second brain was starting to get smarter and trickier, because instead of thinking about where Father was and if he was safe or if he was hurt or if he was scared, like my first brain would, all I was thinking about was how perfect words can be. Mrs. Needham and Mother had both been gone, or had both told me, Deza, you have to pull yourself together. And I sat on the couch wrapped in Mother's arms. I felt big hunks falling off me and thumping to the ground. This must be how a tree feels in autumn, when it watches the leaves that have been covering it all summer start to be blown away. It must feel this hopeless and lonely. I knew I really had to reach out and pick up the fallen pieces and pull them back. Mother said, let's not tell Jimmy anything until we know more, Deza. Can you manage? You know how Jimmy can read me. I'll just stay away from him and it won't be long, will it? Deza, you know I can't tell you that. We'll have to endure. Can I sleep with you until Father comes home? Mother hugged me tighter. You read my mind. I was going to ask if you would. Thank you, Mother. Please, Miss Malone, thank you. Mother had pulled herself together. She sniffed and said, but there are two conditions. First, you've got to promise to tell me all about Mrs. Needham again and again and again. I'll never get tired of hearing that. Okay. And second, you cannot wear those patent leather shoes to bed. My shins would look like ground beef the way you toss and turn. I thought I knew what it meant to be really scared. I thought Jimmy had given me enough practice so that nothing would ever bother me. When we were younger, he'd sneak up on me and go boo and would jump out, showing his teeth and growling, anything to try to make me cry. Mother explained that he was a boy and couldn't help himself. Then one day it didn't work anymore. I figured all the scaredness in me had got used up. I've never been more wrong about anything in my whole life. There is nothing more terrifying than waking up and not being sure where you are and hearing your mother scream from a long way off. If there is, I don't want to know. I jumped out of bed and flew down the stairs. Mother was on the floor halfway in the front door, being held by our neighbor, Mrs. Kenworthy, and howling. I froze. Mrs. Kenworthy said, Peg, they don't know for sure. Mr. Rhymes is outside. She looked up, saw me, and said, Oh, Deza. Peg, Deza is here. Mother took a huge breath, stood up, wiped her eyes, and told me, Sweetheart, I'm going to have to go out for a minute. Don't wake Jimmy. She ran past me to go get dressed. Mrs. Kenworthy said, Hello, Deza. How are... She stopped and walked to where I was standing. She ran her hand over my head. Is Father... She said, No, we don't know anything yet. Mr. Rhymes is carrying us to the hospital. The hospital? That's good, right? He's just hurt? That's not a funeral or anything, right? She said, It's not good news, but it's not bad news either. We simply have to wait. Mother was back. I won't leave you and Jimmy alone for long. She kissed my cheek and ran out, letting the screen door slam. I walked to Jimmy's bedroom door and tapped. If he was awake, he'd sing for me. I tapped again, then opened the door. He had pulled his pillow tight over his head. I sat on the floor next to his bed and waited. I would have found a more comfortable place if I'd have known how long it would be before we had heard what happened to my poor father.